Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us today. Welcome to the Youth Resilience in the Digital Age Conference. On behalf of the Canadian Teachers Federation and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, we would like to recognize the contributions of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada. In honor of reconciliation in education, we acknowledge and give gratitude to the Indigenous peoples whose land we are on today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jamili Baroud, and I am the Program Officer for the Canadian Teachers Federation. And I'll be responsible for moderating this session today from Vancouver, British Columbia. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize that this initiative was made possible by generous funding from the ESDC. Please also note that today's session is in English, but the platform allows you to listen in French. At the bottom of the screen, a choice of French interpretation is available. Simply click on the globe icon. If you are using translation, an option to mute the original sound is available in your interpretation menu. A short Q&A period will follow the presentation, so please use the question and answer function to ask questions to the presenter or to communicate with technical staff. Also, feel free to use the chat function to connect with other participants, share resources, and interact. At the end of the presentation, I'll invite the presenter to answer your questions in the order that they were asked. And now I'm glad to welcome Michael Furdick, the co-founder of Taking It Global, which provides innovative global education programs that empower youth to understand and act on local and global challenges. Taking It Global's Connected North program, connectednorth.org, provides interactive education resources to more than 100 schools serving 20,000 First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students in Canada's remote Indigenous communities. Taking It Global was awarded the Intercultural Innovation Award by BMW and the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, and was selected as one of Canada's 10 most innovative nonprofits by The Logic. In the past, he turned his interest in technology into several successful online companies, including mydesktop.com, which was sold to internet.com in 1999. He was named by Contribute Magazine as one of 10 tech revolutionaries redefining the power and face of philanthropy. His presentation is called Wellbeing and Digital Inclusion in a Connected North. Welcome, Michael, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. We're really excited. On behalf of the team, I have two team members joining me, Katie and Jason, and we're really excited about spending the next 57 minutes with you, sharing a little bit about our programs and having interactive dialogue with you about some of the ways that maybe what we've learned can inform your programs and approaches as well. First of all, I just wanted to mention that at the end of the presentation, we will share a link to the slides. So I know there's a lot of different resources and statistics and kind of great quotes that we've collected from our partner communities. So you don't have to worry about taking screenshots or noting those down, but you'll get access to all of that at the end. And just before we introduce ourselves, because I'll give Jason a few minutes, he's a Ojibwe language teacher in Rainy River, and he had a class until 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock his time, so he'll be joining us in a few minutes. But we thought we would start with a little Menti, if you've tried this before, just to know a bit more about you and where you're joining us from and your particular kind of interests. So I'll just give you a minute. If you can go to menti.com, you should see that on the screen here, and use the code 1905265. First, we thought it might be neat just to understand, I know there's people from all over Canada who will be watching the recording and joining us. So we're curious, if you put in that code, you should be able to click on the map here and show us where you're joining from. So we'll start with that, and then we'll just have a quick question about kind of how you're connected to this topic or issue. We'll just give about 45 seconds here for everyone to click on. It's great. So we have people from a number of different provinces, and we'll definitely make sure we help share the the link with our partners in the territories as well. Hopefully we can get more, this really speaks to the challenge as well. Just the bandwidth access in the territories can be a little tricky. So one of the things I'll share a little bit later is some work we've been doing just to get recordings of resources shared in the territories. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to include the recordings from this conference in that package that we send up to our partner schools and communities. So thanks everyone for sharing here. I'll just move on. Looks like we have 32 people connected in, so that's great. Thanks for clicking. And then this question, just to help us kind of tailor some of what we share with you today, we'd love to know what role you play in this kind of space of student and youth engagement. Are you a teacher? Are you a youth worker? Are you a policymaker? If you could just share maybe a sentence with us about how you're connected to this area of work, that'll help us kind of tailor some of our remarks or examples and just know a bit more about you. Awesome. So virtual programming coordinators, educators, youth program coordinators, policymakers, family school enhancement counselors, program coordinators from the James Bay Coast. I wonder if that's our friends from Jace Care, youth workers, youth program coordinators. Hello to our friends from Kid Code Jeunesse as well. Give it 20 more seconds. Awesome. Well, thank you. That was great just to learn a bit more about you. And now we'll just take a minute to share a little bit about us. You heard a little bit about me in the intro. This is our 20th year as a charity. It's an organization that I co-founded in my last year of high school, 1999, when the internet was kind of emerging as it's kind of a new resource, the World Wide Web. And as a student, I was lucky to have some really amazing educators that believed in me and gave me kind of encouragement and space to pursue my ideas. And that was also the year the United Nations came out with these Millennium Development Goals, these kind of goals for the year 2000 that would kind of address the world's challenges by 2015. So when we launched Taking It Global as a charity, our idea was, exploring this possibility of leveraging the World Wide Web to create almost like a social network for social good. Could we connect young people together all over the world to take action on local and global issues, to learn about social change? And so really working at the intersection of education, technology, and kind of social innovation entrepreneurship. And that's been our journey for the last 20 years. There's more I'll share throughout our presentation, but that's a bit about my background. And I also teach a summer course as well for the Master of Education Technology at Long Island University. So really interested in supporting the next generation of educators. I did my graduate work at OCAD University. I did a master's in inclusive design, looking at education. So really interested. I was a student that I feel like wouldn't have been particularly engaged if it weren't for the efforts of some educators that were champions and friends. And so thinking about how can we include every student in their learning. I know Jason was able to join us. Maybe Katie, I'll let you introduce yourself next, and then you can pass it off to Jason as well.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Katie Birch. I'm first and foremost a school lead, and I also work with a lot of the education partners that we have as part of Connected North. I'm also a teacher. I'm an educator, just like many of you I saw in the Menti. Lots of teachers and educators here too. I'm elementary school trained, but I also have worked with many First Nations communities from K to grade 12. So I chose to work with Connected North because I love the work that they do for students in the North, and having that experience and knowing what it's like to be teaching in very far north places, I really love being part of this program. So that's why I'm working for these guys, and I'm going to pass it off to Jason. You get to end the intros, Jason.
You got you, Katie. Yeah, Buju, my name is Jason, Buju Nindotem, Nikusum Nikoning, Nindonji, Buju Nindotem. I am a self-taught Ojibwe language speaker. Decided when I was 20 years old to teach myself language instead of being dependent on someone else to teach me. So I teach with for the Rain River District School Board, as well as Taking It Global. I've been with them for 3 years now. just developing curriculum. I developed curriculum for 0.5 of my job. Kind of got reduced to I think 0.3 now, but I'm in the classroom more now, so I teach grade 7 and grade 8 Ojibwe. I'm proud to be doing that, and I'm just glad to be here. And if you guys have any questions, we'll be here. You go ahead.
Thanks so much, Jason and Katie. Thanks, Jason. Really excited to have you share some of our recent collaborations in a little while. So what I thought I would do is just start by introducing the Connected North program, which we've helped to lead as a charity for about 6 years, and was originally founded by Cisco. And since the program is all about using video to bring learning to life, rather than just talk at you about it, I'm going to just share this quick video that kind of provides a program overview here of Connected North.
We're all connected here and there, north and south, everywhere. We're all connected by what we share. We're all connected because we care.
Connected North fosters student engagement and enhanced education outcomes in remote and northern Indigenous communities.
You know where we are? We're way down at the bottom of British Columbia. And you are way over there in Ontario, right?
This leading-edge program delivers immersive and interactive education services through high-definition video conferencing technology.
We have schools and communities in very isolated parts of Canada who are suddenly able to connect with other students across the country, with experts and innovators, scientists, artists, and world leaders through video conference technology.
Cisco is an organization that provides all the infrastructure and plumbing for the internet, and we also provide collaboration technologies, in particular a technology called telepresence. It's like super high definition video conferencing that really conquers the challenges of time and distance.
I'm really happy to discuss anything with you. I'm thrilled we can do long distance education like this.
Through virtual classroom learning, students and educators participate in engaging and innovative content with the hopes of increasing feelings of empowerment in school and in life.
She's called a Chaco Golden Mead Tarantula.
This was the very first book I wrote. There's a picture of Robert Munsch. This is me.
Nice and straight. You guys ready? Jab. Hook. Good stuff.
Doors are opening. This theatre is a replica of a very old theatre, Shakespeare's Globe, that was built in 1599.
The program is continually expanding, with over 30 Connected North partnering schools having run over 700 sessions during this past school year. Students across the country have engaged with industry experts, community leaders, and role models to help support the strengths, challenges, and learning outcomes for each classroom.
They're able to see people who work in the fields that they're studying about.
You guys have caribou up there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what I'm going to do is show you how to make a stew. Now you can use caribou, moose meat.
How can you explain global warming to someone that doesn't believe it's real?
The Arctic is absolutely pivotal to global climate stability.
They have an opportunity to share what they're interested in, and we look for ways to bring that into the classroom.
The guy who did the session was totally blown away when one of my students said, I had beluga for lunch.
I had beluga for lunch. Had beluga for lunch? All right.
Relationship building is key to establish meaningful connections that hold Indigenous perspectives and student well-being at the center of content and process. Connected North strives to deliver content that is relevant to the unique cultures, local contexts, and priorities in each school.
My people are called Inuit. Can you say Inuit?
I really believe in authentic knowledge, having the lens and the perspective of the people who live and practice the culture and that,
So it's our elders who have taught us a lot of this. So it's our Indigenous foods fused like this, cooked in a modern way. I call it Indigenous fusion.
Students and educators guide how the program will work best for them and their community, aiming to inspire hope and open future pathways by introducing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit role models wherever possible as critical sources of knowledge and information.
I always keep elders with me because the elders are the speakers of our people. They're basically our ancestors incarnate.
Connected North is about creating a sense of connection that is more than classroom engagement. It's about creating positive and meaningful connections to empower youth, to nurture their gifts and encourage their growth, offering opportunities where learning can be a catalyst for increased confidence, hope, and belonging. Connected North, transforming lives through technology.
So that's a bit of a snapshot of the program. And it's grown from just one school in Iqaluit when it was first started as a pilot, when Cisco donated that first telepresence unit and was able to convince a satellite company to give a discounted rate for the video conferencing about 7 years ago. Now this year to serving over 100 schools, all in remote communities. And this is the latest kind of map here. So today what we want to share with you is a little bit about our programs, but really through a framework that we developed in conversation with community partners across the country. We really wanted to understand, how does Connected North programming, how do these sessions contribute to student well-being? We had some support from the McConnell Foundation and their Well Ahead framework. And so we collaborated, we spoke with educators and community leaders and students and organizational partners and elders in more than 20 of our partner schools, 22 of the partner communities that helped to inform this. A number of team members, including Jason and Katie and many others. And then we worked with 2 artists, Alexander and Niall McGizzy-Johnston, to visualize this framework in different ways, kind of based on their visual storytelling methods. So what we want to share with you today is a little bit about that framework and about how each one of those areas of the framework is brought to life through programming. So we have culture, language, and identity, food and nutrition, relationship with peers and students, arts and recreation, parent and family involvement, relationship with staff and authority, and hope for the future. And so for each one of those kind of areas of well-being, we'll share a little bit about the kind of harmful and helpful practices and some examples of how Connected North programming is bringing that well-being area to life and strengthening it in ways that you can also adopt. As I was saying with Katie and Jason as we were preparing, yes, this is a framework that we've created in conversation with our school and community partners, kind of highlighting to us what's important to them. But thinking of my own son who's in grade 3 and the kind of learning he's doing, I think this is really universal in supporting and strengthening well-being of all youth and students. So with that, Jason, I'll turn it over to you. Feel free to tell me kind of next slide to advance, but I'll let Jason speak a little bit about culture, language, and identity, because as an Ojibwe language teacher, this is really an area that he's helped to champion and kind of lead with in partnership with us.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to accomplish all 3 of those in one classroom. But one thing that we've been doing is we've created sessions where we could ask an elder sessions, and we put them on a couple of them on YouTube. And there's actually a Twitter page called @AskAnElder. So if somebody had some questions, we would ask the elder the questions. Once it gets above 10 questions, we would that's when we would go out to the community and record the elder answering the questions via Twitter. So that's still active as well. The other part is language too. I mean, there's been so much language loss in communities. I just I turned 40, and people my age, 40 and younger, there's not a lot of speakers, and a lot of people in the community that I come from, especially, the mentality is like, oh, my grandparents speak Ojibwe, we're not going to lose the language. But it's kind of like a ticking clock that's going on. Our elders aren't going to be here forever, and each time an elder passes away, it's kind of like a library was just burnt down with all the information that wasn't stored on drives or anything like that. So we're kind of in a rush to record elders and get information from elders. And from that, we've started to create some resources as well. Some things that are helpful for our culture and language identity is having the telepresence there so that we can invite elders to come in. Sometimes elders are a little older, and physically, it's tough for them to get upstairs and, just moving around, getting from point A to point B. Some of them have to drive. If they've got to drive to a school, they don't live that close to the school. So maybe it's, I know for my community, it's a 45-minute drive to get to the high school. So distance, this is what helps with that. Let's go to the next one there, Mike, number 10. One thing that's starting to happen is when we've noticed that, one thing that the communities, they all seem to agree on, and 42% of them, is that there's a loss of culture and language in the communities. And 42% of the people, 42.6 had said that. You know, it's not only in my community, but it's all over the place. So as we're studying Ojibwe language, we're noticing things that the culture is inside the language. So how many people know what the word miigwech means? How many people have heard miigwech before? People, a lot of people that I talk to, they think that it means thank you, but it actually doesn't mean thank you. It's actually meat and gwech, two different words. Meat means it is thus that, and gwech meaning enough or sufficient. So how do you get thank you out of it is sufficient? And what happened with that one, it was the Ojibwe people from a long time ago, you know, 1600s, used to trade pelts, animal pelts for metal tools. A lot of times it'd be like knives, forks, axes, things like that. Even muskets. So the trade used to be like a bundle of muskets, however high they stood, that's how high the pelts have to be. So as they're piling them up and they're getting closer to the height of the muskets, they're asking in Ojibwe, meat, gwech, is that sufficient? Is that enough? And because French and Ojibwe are two different languages, the French people thought that they were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And gradually over time, on both sides, they started to learn a little bit of the language of each other. Some learned a little bit of French and Ojibwe. And later on, they found out that it doesn't mean thank you. It actually, they were asking, is that enough? Is that enough? But a friendship and a bond was created after that. So that's where that word miigwech comes from. And from learning Ojibwe language, we have these little nuggets of information that are stored inside our language that are in there. And we have that advantage now to go right to the source, which is the elders, and ask them these questions, and where does this word come from? So there's things in there that we're starting to learn, and that really empowers a student. You know, once you have a student that has been empowered that way and they're understanding what their ancestors had left for them, they're asking, where are the more breadcrumbs? What are the other things that I can learn? And the old Ojibwe language has a ton of them in there. So when it's going to be really devastating if we lose our language. That's why there's kind of a big push for us to get our language back. So now we're able to not just tap into one or two elders. You know, we've got about 6 or 7 of them right now that are active that we can tap into that will help us. Let's try the next slide. So the other one that we did was there was this book by one of my mentors. His name is Anton Troyer, and I read his book over the holidays. It's called the Ojibwe Language Warriors Manifesto. And in there, one of the things that he suggested we do is create resources by Anishinaabe people for Anishinaabe people, but at the same time for everybody too. And this book that we partnered with Josh, Josh did the images for this book, and it's about land acknowledgements. And there's a lot of information that's in there that kind of shows the way Anishinaabe spirituality is. You won't see it at first; it's not right in front of you, but in the book there's signs in there that are doing that. And the way the story was done through like a third person, and it was like that on purpose, because when elders tell stories, there's a certain sense of being humble that they have, and that's one of the teachings, is to be humble. So whenever they're asked to tell a story, you know, they say, I only know a little bit of stories, but I'll share one with you. And it's the same thing with language. I don't know that much Ojibwe, but I'll share with you what I do know. But in actuality, that elder you're talking to is like a walking dictionary. You know, they've got a ton of information and they have a ton of stories, but that sense of being humble has to be put in there. So that's what we did with this story, was we told it the way the elder was told. And she said, well, you know, the way it was told to me, and then she starts talking about the story. And with this one in particular, this one is about the Rainier Train Bridge, which is in Fort Frances. And in Fort Frances, there's this huge lake called Rainy Lake. And there's the river called Rainy River where all the water exits. And at those rapids, there's spirits that live there. So when the Anishinaabe people in our area do land acknowledgements, we talk about whose community we're on, but at the same time, we got to mention the spirit that's the nearest by. And that's where this book came along, because a lot of people aren't really aware of this anymore. And Jen Corriero really did an awesome job when she came here to Fort Frances. She did a land acknowledgement as well as talking about the spirit that lives there in front of a crowd of people. And it was just one of the most awesome things I've seen, because it was a non-Indigenous person that's sharing these teachings and passing them on. And I thought, wow, that is cool. We're all working together to help our language and culture. And that's the way I envision Canada. Indigenous people working together with everybody. And when this book comes out, it actually came out, but we started putting a lot of things in there. So the first thing that we did was we put food and tobacco in the water, and we talked to those spirits, and we physically went there. And Niall and I, we asked the spirits how they wanted to be drawn. And this was a couple of years ago, and this was with Niall. This was with a different artist. And it didn't happen right away. And probably, I think about a year later, our tobacco was answered in the form of Josh. Josh had agreed to do this image for us. And I knew that because we put tobacco and food in the water, that those spirits, they would visit Josh in some way, and they would show him how they wanted to be drawn. And when I look at this image, that's exactly the way I envisioned it in my head, because I know that they had their hair was white, they were older, and the spirits are both on each side, on the American side and the Canadian side. And in our area, Fort Frances, we're right on the border with Minnesota. The river, Rainy River, separates us. So these two spirits that are there, they have that connection. And if you look at the image, you can kind of see the line where everything is connected. And that's kind of the way Anishinaabe spirituality works too, is we're all connected. And anytime you hear an introduction, people will say, Bujun and Dinwe Magunag, which is hello, my relatives. And that just shows that we're all connected in some way. And that's kind of what's in this image right here, is showing that we are connected to the spirits, and they're constantly trying to communicate with all of us, and we just gotta open our eyes and see. Sometimes it's you're watching Netflix after work and watching a show, and there's a question that you're wondering about. You say it out loud, and somewhere in the plot of the movie, someone says something and it answers your question in there. And that's kind of how Anishinaabe spirituality works, is you say the question out loud, and then somewhere it'll get answered in some way. You just got to open your eyes. I think that's good for me for now.
Thanks, Jason. I'll just add that the book is available on Amazon.ca if people want to order it and kind of see all the beautiful illustrations that Jason developed with Joshua's kind of illustration capacity. So
yeah, one other thing too with the language, this book has a glossary at the end of it. So it shows all of the words we used and then what form they were, like what type of verb they were and noun. So I haven't seen that with too many books, but this one has those, so that second language learners could learn these ones as well.
Mm. And you had the student, right? The audiobook that was created by one of your students.
Yeah, Emma Breer, she's an up-and-comer. She's really inspired by the language, and she's a grade 10 student, and she's the one who does the audio for this book. And anytime I'm asked to do some audio for projects or anything, Emma's the one that I actually call up and I say, hey, do you have some time to do some audio on this? And then maybe she makes a couple bucks on the side, but she's really inspired, and she wants to be Ojibwe language teacher when she gets older. So for me, that's just so uplifting to know that somebody in grade 10 is going to take over for me, hopefully someday. And it's just awesome. I don't know what else to say. It's just awesome.
Thanks so much, Jason. You can see some of these, the what we can do recommendations. They're some of the things that Jason is leading in his community and that we've kind of learned from and tried to replicate through the Connect North program, including elders, knowledge keepers, community members in programming. It's great to be able to connect. You saw in the video, science centers, museums, aquariums, those kind of virtual field trips are a big part of what we do, but it's also making sure that, we're highlighting role models for students that they can relate to, either in their community or like Jason showed, the elders, especially now with COVID, but even beforehand, the ability to connect virtually through WebEx or Zoom makes things so much easier. And that language programming too. I know there's another school in your district, Jason, where they use Connected North daily for that Ojibwe language instruction because they don't have a local teacher. So these are some of the ideas related to that area. And thanks so much, Jason, for joining us and sharing that. I'll pass it off to Katie because she's been leading a number of sessions around food and nutrition. So Katie, maybe I'll let you take it away and talk a bit about the connections to food and nutrition.
Yeah, no problem. I'm actually glad that we started with Jason because cultural language and identity really is the forefront of all the rest of the well-being framework. The food and nutrition, we really focus with Connected North on making sure that students are not only able to access healthy meals, but meals in their community and sessions that work with the meals and the food that's available in their community. And for specifically the Nunavut schools, it's listed under helpful. The country food is just their traditional foods that are accessed in community, like caribou meat and things that are harvested from the land. So with Connected North, we actually give students the opportunities to plan with our chefs. We have a really amazing Indigenous chef, Kanina Terry, who's actually local to this area that I live in, where she helps students develop meal plans based around the foods that can be accessed in their local community, but also thinking about things like, how processed foods are so available in their community and how can they sort of divert away from those processed foods and go back to the traditional ways, but make it in a way that's fun and creative, but also using those natural resources available in community. Maybe we can just go to the next slide, Mike, because I think the next slide sort of speaks to it. So we, through Connected North, try to deliver programming that teaches students to prepare healthy meals with locally harvested foods. But we also, like Mike mentioned, we work with some of our even American providers where, for example, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, where we have one of our really great providers that wasn't necessarily familiar with the Canada's Food Guide, and in particular the First Nations Food Guide of Canada, where it highlights the traditional foods. So we were able to teach and work with that museum to deliver content that was relevant to our students. So we work really closely with our providers with Connected North. We also deliver programming that teaches students how to make healthy food and make healthy choices. Again, working with those providers closely to seamlessly integrate the culture, language, and identity. For example, we work closely again with the Royal Botanical Gardens, and one of our providers there that's based in Hamilton, Ontario, Corrine, she not only teaches the students how to grow and care for food in their community, but she also spends time doing research about the communities she's teaching to, and asks questions of the students, shares images, finds out the locally sourced plants that are available in that community and speaks directly to those students. So working really closely, like you saw in that video, with our providers to have a good understanding of where our students are coming from makes this program really successful. And that all falls under building really positive relationships between the communities and the providers. This is an example here of Kanina Terry. She's our Indigenous chef, and you'll see she's actually working out of her cabin in the bush in Northern Ontario. You can see up on the left on the back, a partridge flew into her window. So she was talking to the students about how she had dinner the other day by the partridge that, sent itself to her doorstep. Again, you'll see that at the bottom of the picture, the students are in a cooking class. She's teaching them how to make bechamel sauce. But because she was familiar with where those students were from, she actually took out her ulu, which is a traditional knife in Nunavut, and she was cooking with the ulu, and she was speaking to the students about ulus and the different types. She was also sharing She's also a tanner. She tans her own hides. So she was actually sharing with the students her experiences with tanning, and the students also, because they had multiple sessions with this provider, they got to know Kanina, and they were really outspoken and open with her about their traditional practices. And I thought I would just share this like 1-minute video, and it's a student speaking to Kanina about, I think you just click on the picture, Mike, speaking to Kanina about, oh, there we go, about his experience tanning in Nunavut.
Big sheet of plywood, and that'll stretch it, and like with the skin inside out. And I'm not too sure how like I can never remember, but like sometimes like you're not supposed to let it face the sun or something, or like I don't know. But
yeah, the sun dries it out like too quickly, right? Yeah.
We can stop it there, Mike. That's fine. We don't have to spend too long on that. But it was just really neat to see the students' bechamel sauce boiling up on the stove there, and they were allowing that wait time to really learn and share with the students, which is a really important part of the program as well. Another way to do that is through arts and recreation, which is another part of our well-being framework. And this was probably mentioned before, but every single session we offer with Connected North is tied to at least one of our well-being framework. We track it, and that way we can let the schools know sort of the things that the classrooms are focusing on, if that's of interest to them. So we bring in a lot of Indigenous artists that work with students, so students have the ability to have an outlet to express themselves in a safe space. So we very often with arts and recreation sessions with the schools that I book, and I know other leads, are multiple sessions. We're 2 to 3 to 4 sessions at a time, so they get to know the provider, but also that they can show growth over a period of time, which is really nice. Students get sessions with coaches and trainers and dancers and musicians. So it's really up to the teachers and the students what their interests are, and we can, through Connected North, find anything that's relevant to them. We can move to the next slide, I think. So just a couple of examples of what we deliver through arts and recreation is we do music lessons, guitar, ukulele. We have an incredible provider named Wakaman Paywis. You saw him listed at the beginning. He not only does he do drumming with the students, but he also gets, it's not even just for the students. Wakaman's also able to learn from them, and we actually had a beautiful session where Wakaman was sharing his drumming with students in Nunavut, and the grade 2 students got out their traditional drums and they were drumming along with Wakaman. It was beautiful. So I think we could probably move. We have an example on the next slide because I know we're running out of time here. This is Naomi Smith, and she is one of our Indigenous content providers who does beading. I wonder if that video, can you hear it? Oh, there we go.
Knowledge lives on. And even though they don't,
it's a little bit low.
Sorry, I was trying to.
That's okay.
Consider that I'm passing on that knowledge so that that knowledge lives on. And even though they don't realize it, you know, they're now part of that story. And I think that that's what's so important, because that's how our ancestors passed along knowledge to one another. You know, and it is about that preservation of things that are important to an individual and to the community. And I think that's one of the things that captivated me about Connected North, was this idea that we were using technology to reach communities that I couldn't just access by going. They first learn how to do beading, they're not very relaxed, but the more you do it, it actually is a therapeutic thing to do. There's that thought process, there's anticipation, there's excitement, there's the sense of pride in learning something new. You know, there's a lot there that I think supports a student's emotional well-being. And I know, like, growing up as an Indigenous person, you know, it wasn't always easy. I wasn't always comfortable with my Indigenous heritage. And I think that sense of self is sometimes lacking in a classroom experience. So by incorporating our Indigenous arts into that, it's adding to that wealth and that sense of self.
And that was Naomi Smith. She's one of our at the moment, one of the very few instructors that will go through beading and craft activities with our students. She sends kits up to them. The students get to ask questions, and she takes as long as they need to learn those skills, which I think is really great. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. I'm speeding fast. Relationships with peers and students. We can go to the next slide, Mike, if that's okay, or Vanna. Okay, so this is a component of Connected North that is super important, and we've started to work with some schools on doing classroom to classroom connections to develop relationships with peers and students from even across a district. So basically, it just provides how it's helpful is it's supportive and caring friendships. It does exchanges that offer mutual support. I have a couple of classes that are working on a shared novel study together, which is really neat. And without this technology, it may not be available in those communities, especially when we're talking about Nunavut. And also having safe spaces for genuine conversations. We can move to the next slide, Mike, because I think I have some examples of relationships. We have a really neat project going with the Canadian Red Cross, and Red Cross has been going into classrooms. Normally they visit classrooms in person, but now they're offering sessions virtually with our schools around topics like healthy relationships, bullying prevention, safety, and psychological first aid. And in some cases, the Red Cross have been able to do crisis management even through our video conferencing units, which is really nice. And sometimes that does take priority. So this is one example as well. There's a student in one of my schools who has been identified as deaf, and through Connected North, we were able to bring in an American Sign Language instructor to work with the classrooms during the day and work with the students to learn alongside the little girl who was also learning American Sign Language and support her. So that obviously is building relationships with peers, students, teachers, all as one group learning together. So that's just one example of what we can do to build relationships between peers and students within the Connected North environment. And that sort of falls into the relationships with staff and authority, because those teachers are also involved in that project, the sign language project. We can just go straight to the next one, I think, Mike. We can skip that one. So this is a relationship with staff and authority, as we can develop programming facilitated with teachers that requires follow-up by instruction with teacher adult. That's sort of where the American Sign Language falls in. Teachers also have the ability to book professional learning through Connected North. They can get some support in developing their own programming from other teachers and sharing their thoughts and ideas and feelings with others. And on the picture on the next slide, you'll see that this is a really neat story. We had language teachers from one region in Nunavut, so it was across 3 communities, but one region, and they were able to use the video conferencing to connect for monthly meetings, to do co-planning with each other, to build curriculum around the Inuktitut language. So before, these people had never been able to meet except it was in person. They would fly out to Yukon territories, but now with Connected North, they're able to use the high definition technology to have regular meetings and co-plan together. And each community takes turns hosting the meetings. So everybody takes responsibility. And this was something that was initiated by the local staff in each community, which is a really nice story.
And I know in this day and age where we're all kind of on WebEx and Zoom and Skype all day, it may not seem that extraordinary, but when we started the program, it was about $30,000 a month for the bandwidth that we had to raise money for the 3 schools that were participating. And today things have improved, but there's still a limit. We can only organize about 7 sessions at a time across, in that region, about 42 schools. So although in the South, for many of us, these kind of video calling, FaceTiming, things like that seems like second nature. We still have to go ahead and book. These are many of our communities, all of them in Nunavut, are satellite only. And so it requires scheduling and booking that time, and that bandwidth is very scarce. So these aren't connections that have happened before in many cases because of that limited bandwidth.
Yeah, and I mean, even with everybody, taxing their bandwidth right now, people in Toronto are still struggling with their internet with everybody on Zoom. So it is really interesting that people in Nunavut almost have more access than others in some cases. Okay, so parent and family involvement. This sort of falls along a similar story to the ASL, the American Sign Language. but we're also able to record the sessions that we offer, the lessons in American Sign Language, and we share those lessons with the parents and families. But also, I would say the largest impact on parent and family involvement is when their students come home and they talk about the incredible lessons that they've experienced through Connected North. You know, as a parent myself, it can be challenging to get anything out of my son when he comes home from school, but I can tell you from experience that when the kids come home after a Connected North session, the parents hear stories about where they visited today. They went to see sharks, or they watched a puppet show on social development and that kind of thing. We also offer sessions around planning for community events. One community that I'm working with, Bearskin Lake First Nation, they are actually partnering with Choose Life, an organization where they're able to offer sessions through Connected North for their cultural week, for example, for the entire community. So they're inviting students, but also inviting elders and community members, inviting them into sessions, and also it's all part of developing. We're bringing in a woodland artist to work with the community members through Choose Life and also through the school, which is really neat. We also have opportunities for students to design and host their own events. I have a class currently working on a puppet show, and they're going to work on sharing that puppet show with another school, which is really awesome. And I've also worked with a school where they've been able to share a Christmas concert with family down south, where normally those family members wouldn't be able to participate. So that's something we're looking into. And that includes, events like graduation, or, training for workforce, or, where we have a lot of partners that we're working with through Connected North to bring access to community members. This is a really neat example of a group of our teachers' assistants that were working with our American Sign Language instructor, learning sign to prepare to support that student. And what's amazing is seeing, 7 to 8 people show up every Tuesday to Thursday to learn sign language to help this one little girl in the school. And this also involves, getting students access to speech and language therapy, physiotherapists, all through the use of this technology that normally students wouldn't have access to. I think, are we at the end?
Thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate that, sharing that kind of whirlwind. I know there's a lot here, and there's a lot that we try to support through the program, kind of wraparound supports. And I think even when it comes to parents and families, it's kind of rebuilding trust. You might have seen on the slide there, but obviously, the intergenerational trauma caused by the legacy of residential schools, making sure that students have access to those positive role models is a big part of this, and rebuilding trust in the education system, and creating that ownership over it. And for the last area of well-being, hope for the future, is really all about trying to highlight role models, highlight examples that students can relate to and students can be inspired by. And this is one particular section where, yes, we have resources that we've created through Connected North for our school partners, but we've also created some resources that all of you can take and share for yourselves as well. So that's really the connection here. Set an example of what's possible, and really building self-confidence. So we spent a lot of time over the last few years building relationships and identifying role models. One of our other colleagues, Kim Diamond, who you saw in the video, who is a teacher, high school teacher in Nunavut for many years, she decided to move south, and she spent a year kind of crisscrossing the country, attending post-secondary institutions, meeting with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students, helping us identify and build those role models. And now we have over 80 of them across the country that we involve in our programming. During COVID, the adaptations around how can we support more learning at home kind of led us to launch 2 programs that are publicly available that you can explore and share with your students or your communities. One is called the Future Pathways Fireside Chats. So we had different team members on our end, different First Nations, Métis, and Inuit team members, interview over 100 of those role models, and then put those fireside chats online. Many of them also have discussion guides for use in the classroom. So from, we have, I think, 5 different senators, we have chiefs, we have MP Kakak from Nunavut, and we have amazing young people in almost every industry and field that have been interviewed and shared. And we're just in the process of relaunching that website to have much more search functionality around it as well. But those videos are all available and downloadable to use offline as well. And the second resource is the Future Pathways Navigator, One of the things that Kim saw, Kim Diamond, I mentioned as a high school teacher, is many of her students that would go on to post-secondary often didn't have a great experience. And part of that was preparation, but part of that were challenges they faced at school. Dealing with racism, a topic on the right, is one that I know personally one of her students experienced. And so what Kim decided to do, what she was inspired to do last year, is put together this website. It has 15 different topics, and it involves interviews with students from across the country, from remote communities, who went on to post-secondary or went on to careers. And it's a resource to help prepare them for those, to navigate those next steps, those future pathways. And both of those websites are openly available, and they're both available on the link below. Finally, I wanted to acknowledge, before we move on to Q&A, we did talk about digital inclusion. And for us, this has been something that's been illuminated by COVID, is the fact that for many students, all of a sudden learning went online. And even those grade 12 students who were starting post-secondary this year, many universities said, okay, you're just going to log into your classes over the internet. And that was, in many cases, almost an expectation. And we were hearing from many of our students that were graduating out of our program that they were struggling and needed access to technology and needed support. So through some initial funding we had from the Samuel Family Foundation, we were able to launch a digital inclusion grants program, but we only had 30 to give away. And so we ran out of those grants really quickly. And then the ESDC Students Support for Students Learning Program kind of came out at the perfect time, because we had run out of that funding. We had huge amounts of demand from across the Connected North network. And we were also included as one of the SSLP recipients. And so far, we've been able to distribute over 400 laptops and tablets to students in the communities we serve. But we've also been able to support bandwidth. We've just recently, this week, we're able to confirm a donation of the Starlink satellite connectivity to Michael Kusagak, who's one of the role models you saw in the video, the Inuit author who's written several books, and also doing a lot of work around the Future Pathways Navigator. So thank you to our colleagues from ESDC joining us, and to this program for enabling that digital inclusion programming. And what we did is we preloaded all of those devices with over 100 gigabytes of content. So all of these Connected North sessions that we delivered during COVID, we had over 100 of them with permission to share recordings. We had over 121 interviews with role models. And we had a program called Create to Learn, where we launched a series of digital media training that was supposed to happen in community, but we hired 50 different First Nations, Métis, and Inuit creatives to launch free, downloadable kind of training programs on digital skills and traditional teachings. And so we were able to preload all of those different devices with over 100 gigabytes of content. And if any of you are listening and would love access to that content for your community, your students, devices you might have, send us an email, and we'd love to send you a USB key with all of those resources. So with that, I know we have about 8 minutes left, so we wanted to make sure we stopped. We'd love to hear, I know we have a few questions I think popped up, but thank you for giving us this opportunity to share this experience with you. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the work that you're all doing. I know many of you are doing complementary work, working to serve young people in these communities. So it's really an honor to be doing this work, to be able to share it. Thanks again to all of our community partners, educators like Katie and Jason for informing the work. And we'd love to spend a few minutes having a discussion with you before we close.
I just want to pass on a thank you to the three of you, Michael, Katie, and Jason. I hope everyone listening enjoyed this amazing presentation. I also just want to note quick that I don't see any questions in the chat box quite yet, but I will monitor it as we go. So please feel free to write your questions down in the Q&A or in the chat box, and then we'll get Michael to respond to those as they come in.
Thanks. I also have three three links here we'll share. One is a link to the slides. So if you'd like to download a copy to have some of these links and resources, it's there. There's our Connected North program inbox, which will go to the right person depending on what your inquiry is. And we had to kind of, we weren't able to provide much of the content that's part of the Wellbeing Framework. There's lots of different research references and lots of different recommendations. And this has been published as a book on Amazon. It's the link is there. We're just selling it at cost to cover the printing. But if you're interested in kind of a paper copy of this, it's also something that we've shared with all of our Connected North school communities as well. So we welcome you to have a look.
Great. And Sherry, just so you know, there, Katie did pop in the email at the bottom in the chat box there. So Connected North at takingitglobal.org. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left here.
One of the other resources we can highlight, there's a number of different resources around defining well-being, but the First Nations Mental Wellness Continuum Framework that was created as part of the Thunderbird group is a really powerful resource as well that we use. There's about 7 or 8 different references that are in the book and are in the end of the slide deck here, but I wanted to highlight this one. And also for anyone working in Nunavut, I'm sure they're familiar with the kind of IQ principles, the societal values of the Inuit in this graph that the government of Nunavut put together. So these are some additional resources to learn from too.
And Michael, another question popped up here. An anonymous attendee says that, Michael, you touched on this, but they might not be fully understanding. And they're wondering if you could share a little more about what makes the technology different from Zoom, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, the Connected North program is really open. We have a number of schools using a variety of different technologies, but it was founded and the majority of schools use Cisco's telepresence technology. And the difference is that it's essentially hardware based. So, you know, on this call, we're all using our computers, but telepresence actually uses kind of physical hardware endpoints, almost like a 55-inch TV with a whole bunch of technology built into it. And I guess the biggest advantage, there's kind of a couple different advantages. One is that it's kind of all it does is video conferencing. So, you know, sometimes computers have updates or need to be, you know, have software problems or viruses. This is kind of like dedicated technology just for video conferencing. But the second and most important part is it has some really advanced codecs which compress the video and audio and allow for control of the amount of bandwidth that's used. So, you know, one of the challenges often is something like Google Hangouts or Skype or Zoom is it can take a lot of bandwidth and you can kind of lose control over how much bandwidth it takes. You know, you can't really adjust that on your end other than turning off your video. But with the telepresence technology, it uses much less bandwidth than those tools and also provides a lot of control behind the scenes. When you're booking something like a satellite call on a bridge, you can reduce and limit the amount of bandwidth. For example, you can prioritize the audio or you can limit the bandwidth for transmitting. So for the schools that we serve, it's much more important that they get a good quality video than the person presenting get a good quality video of them. So often we'll kind of turn down the video quality for transmission because upload bandwidth is usually more limited and more scarce and will increase the quality that the students see. So it just provides a lot more, I guess, kind of like control over the connection, but it's also incredibly secure. It's used across education, healthcare, and corrections. And so I think the Cisco platform, WebEx, telepresence, security is kind of essential and really important. And that's one of the kind of key things as a kind of an enterprise solution. But the majority of schools that are part of the program, the technology has been provided for free. Cisco's foundation, since the program started, has donated over $5 million in hardware, employee time, and support. And so when they started the program and even up till today, often their employees will actually go fly out to a community, help install the hardware, provide troubleshooting support. And so it's really much more of like a full service model. But we also do have some schools that, you know, don't want to have every classroom wired up and wouldn't need to buy that technology for every classroom. And so they might just use a webcam and a microphone. But especially in the satellite communities, that level of control over quality and video conferencing is really important.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you to everyone who's attended and asked those incredible questions. Sorry, I'm just monitoring the chat box here. So again, this brings us to the end of the session. We invite you to view the resources and recordings of the event on the conference page, so digitalresilience.ca. And to tweet about the conference session using Digital Resilience 2021 and to tag us on social media. So thanks again to, of course, all three of you for answering those questions and for the great presentation on the Connected North Wellbeing Framework, which is designed to support educators in Canada's remote Indigenous communities with severe bandwidth limitations. It was a pleasure to have all of you here. It was also a pleasure to have you three with us and to share your wisdom with us. Thank you all for attending. Merci à toutes et à tous. And I just noticed here that we're going to just put up that link for you again. So the digitalresilience.ca and then the hashtag as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie and Jason. And I know Katie is writing some answers. There were last 2 questions in at 4:59, so we'll respond in the chat there. But thanks to everyone for attending, and thanks to Katie and Jason for sharing their time with us as well.